Hello, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough, and at it again with another vlog video, and this is rounding out the requests of the indie web cartoons that longtime fan Jasmine Bryant has requested me to do. So at the beginning of the year I did Digital Circus, and then middle of the year I did Lackadaisy, and now we're getting to the third and final one that she wanted me to look at, which is Murder Drones. And I'm doing this as a vlog because Murder Drones is only one season long, and, well, last time I tried doing a whole season retrospective and going point by point, you know, with a web series that had an overarching plot was a hell of a boss, and that video took a lot out of me. So I figured that if I were to ever do another one of these kind of videos, I would just kind of do it unscripted and just more generalized. I'm not going to go point by point like I did with that video. So instead I'm just going to talk about sort of key plot elements and just sort of go down my overall thoughts on the series. And this is interesting because this series is not only made by the same studio that made Digital Circus, and will also be making the first season of Lackadaisy. Like, that recently just got picked up by Glitch. But it's also made by Liam Vickers, who I talked about previously when I talked about his animated pilot Cliffside, which I really liked. I thought that was a series that could totally make for an interesting web series, but I guess he just didn't really feel like doing a whole lot with it, because after the pilot and some music was posted to his channel, it didn't go anywhere. But I even mentioned Murder Drones at the end of that video, and I only saw like a little bit of the first episode, and I liked what I saw. So I figured, okay, well, maybe if the first season wraps up, I'll do a video talking about this one, and then it was requested. So I figured, hey, that's pretty appropriate. But what I wasn't expecting, and they said the same thing for Digital Circus too, this is going to be just a one-season thing. Liam Vickers has said he wants to do more with the series at some point, like explore the world a little bit more. But he said that it's pretty much a mini-series. It's going to be an 8-episode season, and then that's it. And I could definitely see them doing more with this universe at some point, because it is an interesting plot that they came up with. But I'm kind of glad that it's only one season, and I'm actually interested to see where Digital Circus is going. Because right now, Digital Circus is on the cusp of having 3 episodes. The second episode came out like earlier in the summer, and the third episode's coming out sometime in October. So what exactly is Murder Drones about? Well, it's far off in the distant future in the 3000s. It's like 3017 or 3074 or something like that. But it's far off in the future, and humans have colonized an exoplanet, as they call it, called Copper-9. And while humans were, on this planet, they also had worker drones, which are these robots they built to help them when they were, on this planet looking for things. And then eventually, the harsh living conditions on the planet resulted in the humans on the planet freezing to death. And the robots eventually gained a sense of independence, and the parent company that, more than likely created them, because, let's face it, all these robots, while having slight differences, all look relatively similar. This parent company is sending what they call decommissioned drones, or as they are referred to as murder drones, to take out the robots, and we can only assume that once they successfully take out the robots on Copper-9, these robots will either be shut down or disassembled or killed off themselves. But this is expanded upon way later. They do the backstory in the first episode, and then we follow our main character, Uzi. This is the other thing that makes it interesting when talking about some of the other indie web cartoons I've talked about, because we got some reoccurring voice actors here. We have the same actress who played Charlie in the Has-Been Hotel pilot as Uzi, and the main male character, N, is played by the same guy who plays Angel Dust in the pilot for Has-Been, and he was also in all the other ones. He was Jax in Digital Circus, he was Rocky in Lackadaisy, and here he plays N, but we'll get to him soon. So Uzi is a angsty teen girl, and she lives with her father who doesn't really understand her, and her mother is dead, and this comes into play sort of midway through the series, but more on that later. She goes to school, she hates her existence, she thinks that there's more to life than just being walled off in this little bunker area that they live in. which they use to not only try and avoid the murder drones, but they also use it to try and, brace themselves through the harsh snow and the living conditions on the planet itself. But Uzi doesn't like her existence there. She's constantly having a bad attitude, and then ultimately she decides that she's going to try and leave. So she leaves the bunker area, comes across these murder drones, and this is where she meets N, who at first, like the other murder drones, wants to kill her, but then she ends up knocking him out, and then he comes to, and it seems that he got a temporary reset, and he sees her as a friend. And so then this causes the beginning of their relationship, and he's more than happy to be her friend. And that's something I liked about the actor's performance. I really liked how Michael portrayed this character, because one thing that always worries me, especially with actors who are like sort of, hot and up and coming and on the rise with their careers, I'm always worried that they're going to get typecasted. And honestly, I mean, yeah, Angel Dust and Jax are probably similar characters, but they're not exactly the same. Rocky definitely didn't feel like either of those characters, and N feels like he's completely different from the rest of them, because N is he's a sweetheart. He's a good boy. He's just genuinely friendly and positive and outgoing, and it works really well off of Uzi's, emo, angsty teen girl persona, and he just really wants to help her, and you actually do believe their chemistry, and slowly throughout the course of the series they do end up falling in love with each other, and it actually feels natural. That actually was one of the things I liked. I actually liked seeing their relationship grow. It's a little bit rocky in the beginning of the series, but anyway, yeah, so we establish N and Uzi. They become instant best friends, even though she's still a little bit perturbed by him. And then you got the other two murder drones. You have the leader of this trio, J, and you have V, who she basically becomes, how do I put it? She's not really an antagonist, but she clearly doesn't like Uzi. It's kind of hard to describe, but she basically becomes a tag-along. And near the end of the show, while it seems that her and Uzi have a better relationship, you can tell that they both still kind of can't stand each other. But anyway, one thing I did like, because it's definitely highlighted in this first episode, they get this right out of the gate, I really liked the design of the robots. I really liked that it felt like they weren't just your typical robots with mechanical parts and all that. Like, they introduced this whole thing that, like, it's not just that the murder drones show up and, like, disassemble these robots, they murder them. And it seems like they feast on their blood or oil because they're robots. And I kind of liked that. It's like the robots have more of a sort of organic thing going on. Like, they have, like, fleshy tongues and stuff. And they, like, later there's a part where, in the 5th episode, Uzi ends up sprouting wings. So maybe she's part murder drone or something like that. At least that's what we're led to assume when you first watch the episode. I like that whole, like, it's not just that they're completely metallic and robotic. Not only do they act like people, but they also have sort of organic parts to their being. I thought that was kind of neat. And some robots are more cannibalistic than others. They explore that in not just with the murder drones in this first episode, where it seems like you see them like feasting on their victims, but you also have these like blatant redneck robot cannibals in like the 6th episode. That was interesting. But basically, from this point on, Uzi is trying to work a way to get off the planet and figure out more about her life, because it seems that she has some kind of special ability that was brought on by this thing in the 2nd episode called the Solver, which is like this glitch that ends up forming into this big anomaly monster. And then halfway through the series, we find out that this was actually a robot back on Earth that worked alongside N and J and V, and this robot's name was Sin, which communicates with a text-to-speech voice. And that reminded me of so many other things. It's like, oh man, it's like the autopilot from WALL-E and Robot Jones that also came to mind. It's like, I thought it was kind of cool that they at least had one robot character that had a text-to-speech voice. And the fact that it's the villain also adds this like kind of unsettling, like non-human presence to it, which I thought worked really well. And then you got these flashbacks. The big flashback episode is episode 5, where they go into N and V's memory banks to try and figure out like what their pasts were like. And they used to be servant drones for this rich family. And even though it's in the future, like when humans have like robot servants working in their mansions and whatnot, apparently these people, I guess class just never dies, and these people act like they're living in like the 1700s. Like, and I also like that we don't see the humans. Like, it's probably a style thing, and maybe they didn't want to reveal too much of what the humans look like. But I like that they're pretty much presented in these like kind of shadow forms, and they just have these like piercing white eyes, and you don't really see what they look like for the most part. I thought that was a neat choice. But sorry if I'm jumping around from episode to episode, but like the second episode introduces this whole solver thing, and then it's expanded upon way more in episode 5. And then the last 3 episodes, Sin basically becomes the out and out villain of the series. Episode 3 is this like Carrie motif, because at the end of episode 2, the solver plants these like false images into Uzi's head that the murder drones are untrustworthy, so she wants nothing to do with N. So then in the 3rd episode, of course, there's a big prom coming up, and there's like an homage to Carrie at one point. But there are these 2 popular girls that Uzi doesn't like. But one of them is Russian, and her name is Doll, like Russian doll, get it? And it seems that she's a villain because she's trying to kill V, who is crowned prom queen, because her and this other popular girl are working together. But apparently Doll wants to kill V because V was the one that killed her parents, so she's out for revenge. And so for a long stretch of the show, it seems like she's going to be like a main antagonist. At the end of one of the episodes, you also establish this human called Tessa, who is apparently the daughter of the rich family that we see in the flashback episode, and she's come to try and check up on the robots that were sent up onto the planet. And this is going to come into play in the last 3 episodes. Which, I'm going to be completely honest, I'm just going to say it right now, the last 3 episodes are probably my favorite episodes. I really liked the sort of building conclusion that it had, and I mean, I've seen people say that the last episode was a letdown. I personally enjoyed it. I thought they did a really good job with like the ending the storyline, and also like just the action scenes, which all throughout the course of the series I thought were generally pretty good. They're really well animated. The music is actually really good. You have this like kind of Daft Punk, Tron, kind of electronica, rock, metal sound. It's really awesome. And it really sounds the best, I think, in the last 3 episodes. I think they did a really good job with the music all throughout the show, but in those episodes in particular, man, the music just slams, dude. To sort of wrap up the story, eventually it turns out that Tessa actually wasn't Tessa, and our heroes were being played this whole time, because the thing is, they're trying to stop this anomaly that's in the core of the planet, and this is where we come across these redneck cannibal robots, and robot velociraptor looking things. Those were pretty cool. But at first they try to tie down our heroes, and they're going to eat them because, they're cannibal robots and they eat other robots. And Tessa knows some kind of information that involves them possibly having to kill Uzi or something like that. And of course, N can't bear to think of that concept. Well, eventually they all have to split off because they're being chased after by these velociraptor things. V sacrifices herself. But it's okay because at the end of the show, in the last episode, it turns out she's still totally fine. And she ended up taming them, and she's like riding on one of them, like Chris Pratt in Jurassic World. That was a pretty funny visual, but yeah. Before we finish this off, I just gotta point out the humor in the series. I liked it. It sort of does the same thing that Digital Circus does, in that it doesn't really rely on a lot of like swearing and whatever, which again, I don't really care. Like, I don't really care if there's a lot of swearing or whatever. But I've seen people complain about adult animation just like, oh, well, if they can't think of a joke, they just rely on the easy swear words, or sex gags, or fart and piss jokes. Thankfully, there's not really any of that. There's not a lot. There's like almost no sex jokes at all. Like the swearing, just like Digital Circus, is pretty much to a minimum. It's like PG-13 in terms of its language. So it definitely felt like there was a lot of restraint. And a lot of the humor, like, there was definitely a lot of instances where it felt like Liam Vickers' style of humor, because it was reminding me a lot of the kind of humor in the Cliffside Pilot. Like, there's a lot of that kind of, like, look out, random background character, and then random background character dies. Like, stuff like that. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't, because I don't know what it is, but every once in a while you'll get dialogue where it's like, characters are like, oh man, I'm an edgy OC now! And I don't know what it is. Like, I know that it's supposed to be funny, and in concept I want to laugh, but I'm just kind of like, eh? It's like, it's not that it's a horrible joke, I just didn't laugh at it right away. And that's the other thing with the series. I don't know if anyone else had to do this with this show, but I've seen a lot of people say that this show's plot is really convoluted and it was hard to keep track of. And I'm not gonna lie, the first few episodes was kind of like that for me. I feel like, again, by episodes 6, 7, and 8, I was actually keeping up with it fairly well. But the first few episodes, it was kind of hard to tell what was going on. But I eventually went back and rewatched the episodes, and I feel like I actually started to appreciate the show a little bit more the second time around. I've seen people say that with, like, musicals. I've seen people say, like, I'm not a fan of musicals. Like, the first time I see a movie, I'm like, why are they singing? And then I watch it the second time, and, oh, I actually appreciate the movie more. That's kind of how I feel with this. I feel like I liked it when I first watched it, but when I watched it a second time, I started to get into it a little bit more. And you know, this might be a good thing or a bad thing. Some people could say, like I said, oh yeah, watching it the second time around, I liked it more. But I can also see people saying like, I shouldn't have to watch something twice to understand what is going on. So yeah, it really depends on like how you consume media. But anyway, ultimately it turns out that Tessa was actually Sin who took over her human body, which is a really sick visual. And it's like one of like the only like real human looking design we have in the whole show. And it's really, really creepy looking. And again, the text-to-speech non-human voice really adds that like creepy factor to it. And eventually, here's where they bring in Uzi's mom. Uzi's mom's heart is like this like little robot spider thing crawling around, and she's apparently she's specifically trying to stay away from her daughter because she didn't want to ruin her life, because she was involved with something years ago. I don't want to spoil too much of this, but she specifically stayed away from her husband and her daughter because she didn't want to ruin their lives. But of course Uzi resents that, and you know, she's been looking for her mother because she's wanted to know her for her entire life. And then in the last episode when they actually interact with each other, and even like in episode 7 when Uzi is temporarily possessed by Sin, and there's this whole moment where N reveals his love for Uzi, thinking that he'll snap her out of it, which is a blow to her mom because he promised that he would never, you know, try to get close with her daughter. But then eventually, you know, Uzi snaps out of it and, you know, tries to smash her robot mother's heart and says like, you don't tell me what to do. And then just as it seems it's too late, she finally realizes that was her mother, and she's like, oh God, what have I done? And you know, but she snapped back to normal and Sin's no longer possessing her. Last episode, this whole like extended fight scene where all the main characters, finally people's, you know, allegiances are kind of like at the forefront. Like Jay is working with Sin, and then there's this big fight scene between V and Jay, and I really thought that was a cool sequence. And then the big ending fight between Uzi along with N and V fighting Sin, like this big epic showdown. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good way to conclude things. I really liked how the last episode panned out, and it was kind of cool that, well, you get it that Uzi now sprouts demon wings, which they kind of are demon murder drone wings essentially, and they had that happen earlier in episode 5 as some foreshadowing. But, you know, she gets them. It seems her and N are officially a couple now. And then there's this ending scene where it seems like this entire thing is being presented in her classroom on like a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, and N is reading a manga, literally just labeled manga. I don't know, stuff like that made me laugh. I thought that was some of the funniest stuff in the show, honestly. Overall, yeah, I mean, watching this entire web series, all 8 episodes, I really liked how it ended. It took me a while to get into the beginning of the series, but I did enjoy it consistently. That's why I feel like it's just better to kind of talk about it in more of a free-form way, because it's kind of hard to explain why I liked certain things. It took a while for me to get into it, but ultimately, I would say I enjoyed this series a lot, and I think, you know, it definitely felt like something different. Even though, like, the few jokes that are in it, it felt very Liam Vickers. It felt kind of like the same kind of tone of humor in Cliffside. It also felt like its own thing. It felt way different from Cliffside. This one, you're dealing with, like, you know, the future and time and space and robots, and, you know, like, the robots don't just look like robots, but they act like humans, and they have like some organic matter within them, and that was interesting. I thought that was some of the more interesting world building stuff they had going on. And then when you actually get to the more personalized character stuff, I actually did believe it. Like, I believed Uzi and En falling for one another. I liked the whole thing with her and her mother, and they finally come across each other and interact with each other. I thought that was sweet. They don't really do a whole lot with the dad. I mean, the dad is in the last episode, and it feels like they have a better relationship, but you know, I don't know, they never dedicate like a whole episode to their relationship, like, which I actually thought they were going to do at first, but then watching it, it's like he kind of slowly sizzles out of the series. And some of the other background characters, while they don't do a whole lot with them, like you have this like one dude who's like kind of Uzi's friend named Thad. Like he's sort of part of the first few episodes, and he's in the last episode, but he, you know, just like the popular girl, the one that's not Doll, you know, they're just sort of there for comic relief, which I was totally fine with. I thought they did fine with those characters. But overall, Murder Drones, now that I've actually finished the whole series, I enjoyed it. Took a while for me to get into it, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I feel like maybe if I were to go back and rewatch it again, I'd like it even more, but as of now, watching it twice, I enjoyed it. I really did. It's kind of hard to rank each one of these because Digital Circus ain't even finished. Lackadaisy hasn't even started. I mean, you know, you have a pilot and a couple of shorts, but no first episode for that yet. And this one just wrapped up, so it's kind of hard to compare and contrast. I do know that there's a fan-made crossover between Hell of a Boss. I know this because one of my friends shared it with me, but I feel like I should end this video by sort of giving a minor announcement. I feel like at this point I'm going to be taking a break from doing videos about indie web animation. For the most part, I feel like I've gotten to the big requested ones, and I'm definitely glad that I watched all of these series, and I know Jasmine Bryant is like a really big fan of this show, so Jasmine, if you're watching this, thank you for suggesting it, and I really liked what you had to say about the show. As it stands, I feel like I need a break from this. I need a break from the indie web stuff. Like I've also been getting requests throughout the year, like, oh, are you gonna do a video on Hell of a Boss season 2 and talk about all 12 episodes of that and the shorts, and talk about the first season of Has-Been Hotel, and I've gotten a couple of other ones, like I think like Port and Sea or Port by Sea, I forget the name of it, but that was requested. Talk about what was it? Rhino and the Red Bill, I think was the name. Like there's a bunch of these like indie web projects from a bunch of animators. A lot of them I've followed and kept up with for years. There's one that I was surprised wasn't suggested to me, but I've been watching it lately, and I absolutely love it. It's probably my favorite of the indie web scene. Spooky Month. Love Spooky Month. Spooky Month is great. I love Senior Pellow's stuff, and the fact that it's really into Halloween, my favorite holiday, it's like, I absolutely adore Spooky Month. Will I do a video on that sometime in the future? Maybe. I'd be totally on board with talking about Spooky Month because I love it. It's a great web series. But yeah, I feel like for now I'm going to be taking a break from reviewing indie web stuff. It's not to say that I won't talk about this stuff ever again. I need a break from it. So for the rest of the year, I don't know if I'm going to be going back to Has-Been, I mean, hell, Smiling Friends Season 2 came out. I don't even know if I'm going to do a video on Smiling Friends Season 2 yet. But what you need to know is Smiling Friends Season 2, it's really damn good. It's just as good as the first season, if not a little bit better. There's a lot of fun stuff in second season of Smiling Friends. But yeah, Murder Drones, the main topic of this video, I enjoyed it. Took a while to get used to, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So yeah, that does it for this video. Look forward to the next Media Wiz, and that's going to be the first week of October. We're going to be starting up the 10-year anniversary of Mediaween, and I got some interesting stuff planned for October this year, so look forward to all that when it comes out. But until then, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough.